What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, December 30th. Coming into the New Year weekend. We're going to be talking about that a little bit here. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about on the show today. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443, and Mike is in our control room. And a quick little program note. Originally, we thought we were going to be broadcasting live on Monday, but apparently there has been a change of heart, and we're going to have Monday off, and there'll be replays, but we'll be back live on Tuesday after the New Year's weekend, and we'll just be looking at all of that stuff here. Okay, getting into the news here. First of all, New Year's resolutions, everybody's got them, and we'll probably be talking about that as well. My New Year's resolution is 1920 by 1085. I think that's going to work for me, okay? And I resolve not to make any resolutions I have no intention of keeping. Besides, nobody likes a skinny, sober talk show host, so Claire's laughing in the other room there. You know, I promised to quit drinking, but, I still have to, kill all those internal germs on a regular basis. So, anyway, Vladimir Putin has shown once again that he is a statesman. And what it was, as you know, the U.S. threw this tantrum, Obama threw a tantrum, kicked out 35 Russian diplomats and their families, and closed two Russian diplomatic facilities because Russia's interfering with our elections and all the other nonsense they're putting on out there. And Putin has not retaliated, not kicking out any diplomats. And he says, I'm not going to stoop to Barack Obama's level and expel U.S. diplomats from Russia. He's taking the high ground. And by the way, our server is under heavy attack today, and that's just the reality. Just like Matt Drudge yesterday, Russia today, the powers that be are just so terrified of what you're seeing here that they're trying to shut us down any way that they can. So we'll get back into that a little bit later. But Nigel Farage basically came on out and expressed his admiration for Putin's maturity and not getting down into the dirt, as it were, with Barack Obama. In fact, Putin's even gone one step further, and all of the U.S. diplomats' children are invited to a New Year's party. And by not expelling our diplomats, Putin is making Obama look like a petulant child, and that's exactly what's going on here. And more than that, Putin wants to comply with international law. And the reality is Obama has violated the Vienna Convention by kicking out the Russian diplomats. It's a violation of international agreement for diplomacy. And Obama doesn't care because we liberalologists, we're above the laws of God and men. We're allowed to do these things. Oliver Stone is out there on record slamming the establishment's Russians are coming, the Russians are coming narrative, because it's ridiculous. They're trying to take us all back to the 1950s and the height of the Cold War, and it's not working because those of us old enough to remember that Cold War know it was just a fraud to justify taking huge amounts of money from the American people and putting it into building weapons that really didn't have to work because the idea was they'd never actually be used. And it was just a huge cash-making operation. And the defense contractors were very generous campaign donors to politicians who went along with this. And all of those weapons procurement officers in the Pentagon would do their 20, retire with a full pension, and then on top of that, get a very high-paying job as a consultant to those very same defense contractors they were sending all this money to. It's a huge, huge scam. And again, I always go back to the movie The Pentagon Wars, which was based on a book by the same name, about the inside story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And when you see that or watch it, and I understand it is out there on, I think it's either Hulu or Netflix, And you will understand why the F-35 is the costly piece of junk it is. You'll understand why the Zumwalt is the costly piece of junk it is. You'll understand why the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier may never actually be usable in a real combat situation, because it's all about money and it's all about using fear tactics. The commies are coming to get you. You have to give us lots of money to protect you. And it was just a big, huge scam. Now, as you know, we mentioned yesterday, and we're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just not rejoining our network. We're talking about this Russophobia in the establishment, this hard court press, full court press, to get some kind of a war going with Russia right now before Trump can come on in and just spoil the party for all the war hawks. And yesterday, the FBI and Homeland Security came out with a report saying absolutely Russia's hacked the DNC emails and Podesta and all the rest of it. But they're relying on this idea that people will read the headlines and not read the body. And what's interesting is at the very top of this report, there was this disclaimer saying this is provided as is for informational use only, and we don't guarantee that anything in here is actually accurate. And that was the giveaway right there. But the bottom line is IT experts are reading this report, and they describe it, first of all, as childish, and then they point out it doesn't actually prove Russia did anything. And remember, Julian Assange has said the DNC emails were an internal leak, not a Russian hack. Now, Robert Steele is out there with some very strong language saying the Department of Homeland Security FBI report against the Russians is absolute crap. Our own traitors, not the Russians, are the real enemy. And he's talking about how so many American politicians have sold out to foreign powers, whether it's Israel or Saudi Arabia. But the reality is there is absolutely nothing in that report that proves the assertion Russia had anything to do with the leaks of the emails. In fact, Russia hacked our computers is the 2016 version of Saddam has nuclear weapons. It's another lie to start a war by a government that doesn't know how to do anything but lie. John McAfee came on out and said it's a complete fallacy, and it's outright manipulation, and it's fear-mongering, and it's not getting any traction. That's why they're in a panic. That's why they're hacking all of our servers here. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Before I ask my question, I wanted to thank you and Claire for all that you do.
Thank you.
I was introduced to you through one of your interviews with Richie Allen
yes.
a few months back, and I haven't missed a show since. I mean, so I want to thank you. I can't thank you enough. And if you ever get to Vegas, please give me a heads up. I would love to buy you and Claire a 5-star dinner.
Well, we appreciate that, and we don't know when we're going to be in Las Vegas next. We did a stop over there coming back from one of our few trips to the mainland. But 2017, one thing we are resolving to do is to try and get back to the mainland so that Claire can have some really good singers for her music and also make it a little bit more convenient for me to go on out and accept these invitations. I'm always getting to speak at this or that conference or symposium. So who knows? We may be in the neighborhood real soon. We've already decided we're not going to move back to California without a really, really good reason to do so, because they're going nuts out there. But we'll see. And Las Vegas has really changed over the last several years. When I worked as a professional magician, I used to go out there on a regular basis as an entertainer. Anyway, what is your question here? Do you recall after 9/11, the intelligence services of this country met with the Hollywood, the Hollywood producers or the writers about ideas to get into the heads of the terrorists? Do you recall that? I remember. Yes, they were going on out and recruiting screenwriters and directors to try and craft a believable backstory for these fictional terrorists that they were going to throw at us.
Okay, I thought it was they were looking to Hollywood to try to get these screenwriters to get into the terrorists' heads to think up, like, what are they going to do next after flying planes into buildings? What could they do next? And I'm wondering if they're still turning to these people for maybe for their own ideas, for false flags.
Well, you're thinking 3 Days of the Condor kind of thinking, where they're looking for inspiration in creative writing. But the reality is most screenplays are really very implausible to happen in real life, and hence a screenwriter is not somebody to do an actual analysis of what's inside the terrorist's head, which is why I conclude they were being recruited to try and craft a backstory for the terrorists to feed to the American public to try and make them a little bit more believable.
Okay. Mike, on this anti-propaganda law that Obama signed,
yes.
What makes you think that if it did go to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court would rule in favor of the First Amendment?
Well,
the justices are probably as corrupt as these politicians. The NSA is there listening to who knows what dirt they have on these justices.
Well, we know they can be blackmailed. We know we all saw the very strange way that Chief Justice Roberts was opposed to Obamacare, opposed, and then suddenly at the 11th hour did a 180 about-face, became the deciding vote that passed Obamacare, and then he took off for a week's vacation, I think it was in Malta, so he could duck the press for that. So the possible blackmailing of Supreme Court judges or the threat of assassination is a very real factor. But Trump is going to be able to fill one of those seats coming right on in to the office. The other issue is, of course, the First Amendment's pretty cut and dried. There's no gray area in there. We all acknowledge that military secrets have to be protected, but outside of that, the Supreme Court historically has always ruled in favor of the First Amendment as an individual right, even in some really bizarre circumstances involving bovine feces glued to canvases. But the First Amendment isn't about pole dancers and artwork. It's about giving us the right to be able to tell the government when it is wrong without fear of retaliation. And Obama's new law is clearly antithetical to that, promising a retaliation if we start telling the truth in the face of government and corporate media lies. And the Supreme Court can't rule in favor of that without delegitimizing the entire government in the eyes of the American people.
Yeah. I understand Trump is consulting with, or he possibly interviewing Judge Napolitano. So that would be great if he selected him as his nominee.
Ooh, but, that would be good.
We'll see. But last question, Mike, on Trump. Of course, he hasn't even gotten into office, and we have to give him time. He's had so many problems to confront. But on Israel, he did say during the campaign, and he was quickly attacked for it, that he was going to be neutral. He would be a neutral party in any negotiation between the Israelis and Palestinians. He called it the ultimate deal, and he's a deal maker, and this is one deal that he would love to close. But here, now he's talking about, one, the Republican platform didn't even contain the issue of settlements, and then in light of what happened at the UN, he was standing fully behind Netanyahu. In Netanyahu's condemnation of the White House and the State Department. So I'm a little worried about Trump on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. It just seems like he's flip-flopped so soon before even taking office.
Well,
he's done a 180.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and Trump's views on Israel are definitely one area where I do not agree with him. However, remember what I said about, in many ways, Trump is as dangerously naive coming into the presidency as Jimmy Carter, because way too much of Donald Trump's worldview is based on his having grown up with corporate media telling him Israel is good, Palestine is bad. Once he's the president and he starts to deal directly with Netanyahu and the government of Israel, I think he's going to start realizing that the reality is very different from what the corporate media was dishing out. And obviously Trump is going into office already disenchanted with corporate media. And so I give it about a year, and then Trump is going to go back to being even-handed and balanced, not just because he thinks that's good for him to be doing, but remember that a great part of the U.S. power projection into the Middle East was this illusion that the United States was an impartial arbiter between Israel and all those other nations. Now, obviously, following 9/11, America dropped that entire pretense, and anything Israel wanted, Israel got, which is why so many of those Middle Eastern nations walked away from the petrodollar deal and were rewarded for that with an invasion. So the situation there is very dynamic, and Trump may come to understand that the only way to restore peace and stability to the Middle East he's going to have to turn the United States government back into being a fair and balanced arbiter of Palestine and Israel. But again, we need to give him some time to see what's going on, and I think he's going to start out very pro-Israel, but I think when he is exposed to the reality of what's going on, unfiltered by corporate media, I think he's going to have a change of heart. At least he's open to a change of heart, and he's got the freedom to change his heart. Hillary Clinton was locked up for Israel before she even stole the nomination away from Bernie Sanders. So I think in the long run, the outcome for Palestine is still going to be better under Trump than it would have been under Hillary.
I don't know how much Trump owes Sheldon Adelson, but of course Hillary was completely in the pocket of that Haim Saban. So you're right. I mean, she would have done anything that Tel Aviv asked. But I don't think Netanyahu's going to be around much longer anyway with this case coming, this corruption case. And I think the Israelis, I think most people in Israel realize Netanyahu being the face of Israel is just killing them. They need to get a softer, friendlier face there. Maybe Ehud Barak will come back. Who knows? But Netanyahu's just not working. They're becoming more and more isolated, more and more criticized throughout the world.
You're absolutely,
I think his days are numbered.
You're absolutely right there. And again, I get emails from Israel, not all of them filled with obscene threats. And the general sense is they'd like to see a more moderate government of Israel to tone down all of this hostility and violence because, again, going back to Israel's government's deliberate policy of blurring the line between Israel and all of the world's Jewish people. All of the world's Jewish people understand the actions of the government of Israel are making this world a much more dangerous place for them, and they themselves have had nothing to do with it whatsoever. So they certainly the American Jewish community would be much happier with a more moderate leader for Israel.
Absolutely. And, Putin did play this perfectly on this sanctions thing. Further proof that he's the only statesman in the world.
Well, he's the only adult in the playroom at the moment here. And
right. Absolutely.
Yeah, he did. And he turned this whole diplomat thing around and made Obama look bad. And that's, again, Putin's a chess player. He never makes a rash, reckless move. He thinks things through all the way. And that's a quality that has been sadly lacking in our entire government for decades.
Mike, do you think if Putin had proof that the U.S. was behind the Tu-154, that he would even refrain from confronting them over that?
I think he would stay silent. I think he would stay absolutely quiet right now because if the U.S. had something to do with the crash of that airliner, it's another provocation, and we're going to see more of them. Between now and January 20th, we're going to see the U.S. government try and provoke Russia any way they can. And Putin's just going to sit there and grin at them, laugh at them, actually. And the entire world is seeing who the aggressor provocateur is. We got to take a break here for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And somebody just sent me a flashback to 2014 when the CIA was accused of hacking into the computers of United States senators. And, of course, Brennan denied it because lying is what the CIA does. All righty, getting on back here to this nonsense about Russia hacking, Russia hacking, Russia hacking. We've got to go. Actually, your children have to go kill them for us. Your children have to go kill the ruble and the yuan for us money junkies. Basically, that's what the translation of all this comes down to. Now, you probably already heard about William Binney. He was an NSA whistleblower long before Edward Snowden. And in fact, he was actually the guy who created originally the NSA's global surveillance system back in the days of Echelon. And even he is saying this Russian hacking report by the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI is just junk. It's absolute junk. And little historical note. The FBI were handed the complete plan for the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in August of 1941 by a British double agent, Dusko Popov, codenamed Tricycle. And the FBI decided it was junk and threw it in the trash. So these guys aren't too brilliant to begin with. There was a song called Louie Louie that was out there on the radio, and the FBI was apparently spent 2 years and a lot of money on audio analysis trying to understand the lyrics to make sure there wasn't something obscene in there before somebody finally tapped them on the shoulder and reminded them the lyrics were on file at the Copyright Office. Okay? This is the real FBI, not the wonderful guys that you see on TV and movies. So, as you know, the U.S., Obama, let's put the blame where it belongs. Obama's out there flinging sanctions all over everybody. And apparently one of the companies that has been sanctioned is Zor Security, also known as ESAG Laboratories. And they've been sanctioned for providing digital weapons to the Russian government. And the problem is they don't. They don't work for the Russian government. The white hat hacker Elisa Esage-Shevchenko, in an interview in 2015, said, no, we have no relationship with the Russian government. We don't provide them anything. And the U.S. has now sanctioned her company without any evidence of wrongdoing. I mean, that's how reckless they're behaving here. And again, Julian Assange has given yet another interview saying the DNC Clinton emails, Podesta emails, were an internal leak by a disgruntled employee. Now, William Binney says that the NSA has been tracking the very same IPs the U.S. government claims are the source of the Russian hack attacks into the DNC. And Binney is saying the NSA would have all the necessary evidence, but none is forthcoming. Therefore, it obviously does not exist. Now, at one point, Julian Assange implied strongly that the leaker was Seth Rich, who died shortly thereafter under very suspicious circumstances. He was shot near his home at 4 o'clock in the morning, officially declared a robbery, except that he still had his wallet, his watch, and his cell phone. A lot of wet work going on these days. Now, Russian Foreign Ministry is out there saying that the entire world is now disgusted by Obama's disastrous foreign policy. Remember when Obama came into office, he was going to end the wars, he was going to bring our kids home, you can take that to the bank. And he never did it. The U.S. is still bogged down hopelessly in Iraq. It's still protecting poppy fields in Afghanistan, and cheap heroin is pouring onto the streets of America and Russia. Destroyed Libya, destroying Yemen. Then there's Ukraine. It's been one foreign policy disaster after another after another. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and apparently we are under a major denial of service attack on our server, like the one that took out Matt Drudge in Russia today, and that makes me even more concerned for this coming weekend. If they're trying hard to shut down the independent media or alternative points of view, then that's another reason to think they may be considering some kind of a false flag attack here. Alrighty, so moving right along here, we were talking about U.S. disastrous foreign policy, and to be fair, it wasn't all Barack Obama, and it wasn't all Hillary Clinton. This goes all the way back to George W. Bush. And as a matter of fact, 10 years ago, this day, December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging. And one of the last things he said was, "You'll wish you had me back." And boy, oh boy, do they. Because getting rid of Saddam Hussein was supposed to launch a new golden age in Iraq and the Middle East. And it lasted about 35 seconds. Actually, you could clock it with an egg timer. And it just started this whole dissolution of a stable, peaceful Middle East into all these wars and faction groups, the rise of all these jihadists that eventually merged into the ISIS and Islamic State. It's been one mess up after another, after another, after another. Now, we all know the real reason for invading Iraq had nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, because Iraq did not have them. Had nothing to do with Saddam Hussein assisting 9/11, because he didn't, and even George Bush is on video saying Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And then supposedly it was because Iraq was aiding Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. And the reality was they were fierce enemies. Al-Qaeda favors theocratic rule, and Iraq under Saddam Hussein was the only secular government in the entire Middle East. The real issue, of course, was smashing up Iraq into smaller parts that could be bullied around by Israel, and as punishment for Saddam Hussein starting to sell Iraq's oil for the euro instead of the dollar. That's what it was really all about. Now, is the corporate media going to tell you that? Absolutely not. Apparently, the ACLU and CAIR drafted a Gold Star father of a kid who got killed in the war, to come on out and say that the war on Iraq was for the Bill of Rights. And basically saying that we had to attack Iraq in defense of our country's ideals. No, you didn't. Iraq wasn't threatening our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. The threat to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights has been from our own government in the wake of the wars, citing the wars as the reason we have to shut you down. All right, let's take some phone calls here. We've got Etheric Dave from Crucial Nonsense. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was waiting for your phone call. Talk to us today about what's going on with your memorial site.
Aloha there, Michael. Happy New Year to you, Claire, and the guys in the control room, Dan, Mike, Sam, and even Don, too. Well, we've decided what we're going to do with that is it's going to be kind of a hybrid. We're going to pre-record a bunch of stuff because we have this issue with John being so worldwide famous and all the time zones being what they are and scheduling conflicts. It's going to be kind of difficult to get everybody to sit down in the same place at the same time. So we're going to record the whole first part of the show and take submissions from a lot of different people and compile that. We're going to perform it somewhere live. We haven't decided on the venue yet. And then do a live segment on that, and then we'll get it all posted. Updates will be posted at johninbarbados.com, and we should have some more details figured out here shortly after the first of the year. And anybody that wants to contribute some messages about John, anything, email me, david@crucialnonsense.com, and we'll be sure to get all of those included in there.
What'd you say?
We were certainly caught unprepared by all of this. Yeah. I feel very fortunate that I spent as much time with John on and off air as I did, and I will definitely miss him.
Well, I'm definitely going to miss him, and I'm sorry I had to take the headphones off there for a second. I was responding to something Claire was saying in the other room. But it has been amazing, the outpouring of condolences, and clearly John had an impact that was significant all around the globe. Of course, I've communicated not the individual emails, but their existence, the volume, the number of them, to his family. I'm probably going to want to contribute something also to this memorial as well, because John was a significant contributor to my show. In fact, I think you could call him a fixture. I've had a lot of people write on in and say I looked forward to John's phone calls every single day, and so we're definitely going to have some info to add to your program there, and of course once it is up for posting, we're definitely going to link to it. I'm looking at your website right now, johnandbarbados.com, a tribute to the legacy of John Marsh, the Caribbean critic, and I'm going to go ahead and post this to WhatReallyHappened.com for people to take a look at and bookmark so that they can stay on top of all the announcements regarding this project.
We certainly appreciate you there, Mike. We were certainly unprepared for all this. The site will get prettier as time goes by, and we will get all this done. It is just amazing how many lives he touched. He will live on in all of us that got touched by John in Barbados. So y'all stay safe out there, stay free, keep up the good fight. One of the last things John said is he's going to hold Trump's feet to the fire and make sure that he followed through with the promises. We're going to pick up that torch and we're going to keep running with it. So we'll let you go, Mike. Have a great New Year, and we will talk to you on the flip side.
All right, absolutely. Have a happy New Year, and we're going to switch over to Fran in Washington State. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Aloha nui nui.
Aloha nui nui.
And I signed up on John Marsh's page this morning. Yes, he touched a lot of lives, and it's still going to be coming out as to how many of us he touched. I wanted to comment on the general topic of Obama's failures.
Yes.
And I think there's actually a thread running through them all. And I'm hoping that Trump is immune, but it has all the earmarks of our government as puppets to a shadow government that doesn't reveal itself. They're the money junkies, of course. They're the high-scale money junkies. Anyway.
Well, here's the point. Yes, we understand there was a shadow government, the pullers of the strings behind the scenes, but they're now exposed. 2016 was the year we rolled that rock over and saw what was lurking underneath, and they're scattering in the light. Again, I think one of the major reasons Trump won this election, certainly it was part of the reason that motivated me to support him, is that he is an outsider, and he's got his own money. He's not bought and paid for before he even gets into office, and he's a threat to the system, because he won't do what he's told. And that's why the entire establishment was united against him. Even the GOP party was against him. They were rigging the elections against him. Not enough, obviously. The corporate media is still against him. He's going to be facing an obstructionist Congress. The establishment does not want any changes because they're living very, very well at our expense, and they think that's the way it's supposed to be, and it should just go on like that.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep. Talk to you later.
All right.
Have a great day. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the news, George Soros is still out there. He's screaming and crying that Donald Trump is thwarting his plans to advance the New World Order. Well, George, I'd like to point something out. having billions and billions of dollars that you made by very carefully investing all that cash you got, turning in your fellow Jews to the Nazis in Germany, does not make you God, does not make you wise, does not make you a superior intellect. And having billions of dollars does not give you the right to play God with the rest of the planet. And the same holds true for these other billionaires who think their money gives them special privilege to treat the planet and the human race like toys, such as Bill Gates. The New World Order is a bad idea for everybody who is not part of that ruling structure, because the New World Order is all about bringing back feudalism and serfdom and permanent debt slavery to a global private central bank. And we, the American people, are applauding Donald Trump for thwarting the New World Order, because it's a bad idea. That stepping stone to the New World Order, the European Union, isn't working out very well for the people of Europe, is it? Now, I think humanity is best served by a planet with lots and lots of nations, each self-sufficient, taking care of their own needs, trade across the border, of course, tourism, certainly, cultural exchanges. But national borders serve the same function for planet Earth as fireproof doors in a building or watertight hatches in a ship. They contain an accident. Now, if you prop open the fireproof doors and you lock open the watertight hatches, it may seem like things are better because you can move around and it feels like it's all one entity, but the first office fire destroys that building. The first leak sinks the entire ship. We already saw that happen in 2008 when the economic globalism that was already in place turned the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown from just being a Wall Street problem into something that seriously damaged banks all around the world. Now, there's another reason I'm opposed to globalism, and that is because if there is a single golden throne of planet Earth, it is only a matter of time before you will find some real dangerous person sitting on that seat. So what happens if a new Stalin or a new Hitler or a new Pol Pot gets that throne? There's nobody else to stand up to him and say, no, you are wrong. The other problem, last problem I have with the global government is it will bring to an end all social evolution. Now, if you go back and you study history, you will see that through ancient Egypt, into Greece, into Rome, into China, that everybody is always working to come up with a better society. But if there's only one society, that process will stop, because all established governments work to preserve the status quo. Our government is not progressive. They're not forward-looking. In fact, right now they're looking back half a century ago as being where they want to get the nation back to. We're going to take a phone call from Steve in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I have to agree with your last caller about a shadow government. I think that is quite possible that we do have a shadow government.
Yeah, but they're out of the shadows now. They're out of the shadows now.
Well,
we're seeing
my question to you was, is it too obvious, or is George Soros part of that shadow government, or is that just too obvious for us?
No, of course he's part of that shadow government. It's all the money junkies who are buying and bribing their way to greater wealth and greater power and greater control over our lives. That's as far as the shadow government needs to go. Follow the money.
I was just wondering about that, because I thought maybe that might be too obvious to lead tracks to him and others, and that they wouldn't be stupid enough to actually out one of their shadow government people. But I thought that same thing.
Well, I don't think they outed him. Basically, you look at all these people, the Bilderbergers, the Council on Foreign Relations, and that's the club right there. And they get together and they do their plans. And they counted on the corporate media to keep their names out of the public eye when they didn't want to be in the public eye. The owners of the Federal Reserve, for example, when do you see their names in the news? When do you see their names on these Forbes list of the richest people on Earth? When clearly these are the richest people on Earth, but they don't want that to be seen, and so Forbes will say, all right, we'll start the list down here with the lesser billionaires, George Soros and Bill Gates and all the rest of that, and we'll leave the people of planet Earth to assume that that's as rich as people get, instead of looking at the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of wealth that the owners of all these private central banks have accrued over the last 300 years of this scam.
Yeah. Michael, would you include that Bohemian Grove in that shadow government with the Bilderbergers, or is that just something totally separate? The Bohemian Grove?
I'm sure a lot of secret deals get made at the Bohemian Grove, finding places where they're private and there's going to be no media and there's going to be no possibility of being overheard. It's sort of the same thing that goes on golf courses, just in the wrappings of a Renaissance pleasure fair.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to let you go. Now, interesting story has come on back here. Remember what I said, that if the legal problems start to really pile up around Hillary, that we could see a bug out of some of these top politicians and their aides and officials heading for places without an extradition. So there's a story now, came out of Investment Watch blog, and basically saying that the Clintons have transferred a substantial portion of their wealth to Qatar. And Qatar has no extradition agreements with the United States of America, even though they're all buddy-buddy and friends and we've got naval assets parked there and everything. Qatar does not extradite to the United States of America. We may yet see a bug out. It's going to be a fight, the establishment against Donald Trump and the rest of the American people. Now then, let's see. Boy, the hackers are just not wanting to let go. Michael Moore has come out with a 5-point list on how to stop Donald Trump. We'll talk about it when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And basically, Michael Moore has come out with this list of 5 ways to stop Donald Trump. And a lot of people are starting to make fun of him, as they should, because Michael Moore has now become the poster child for the crybaby liberal sore loser. And he's advocating protesting and disrupting the inauguration. He's trying to organize people for a mass mail campaign to Congress saying, impeach Donald Trump now, we don't care what the reason is. I mean, it's rather embarrassing here. And I used to hold Michael Moore in somewhat high regard because of things like Roger and Me, Canadian Bacon, one of my all-time favorite movies. But I started to lose enthusiasm for him when he tried to blame Saudi Arabia for 9/11, and certainly his anti-gun stance. And I think Moore is basically destroying his own audience with this childish behavior. Okay, now let's take a phone call. Dennis in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Great. Happy New Year to you and Claire and all your listeners. I'm optimistic this year. It's rare for me, but I am optimistic. I don't know why. Maybe it's unfounded, but let's get right to the point. I know you're not much of a debater. I mean, I know if someone disagrees with your point of view, you're not patient with them to kind of sort it out.
Well, that all depends on whether the opposing point of view is backed up with, facts and actual hard data, as opposed to simply ranting and raving and citing biblical scripture for whatever, their position happens to be. So
yeah, I agree.
Can we come to the point, because we're almost to the top of the hour break?
Yes. Well, I was going to talk about Israel and this new resolution thing.
Yes.
Why is it, how long has it been going on? The rest of the world has been voting to stop Israel from invading other people's lands, enslaving them in these open-air pens. I mean, all of a sudden, we've not went through with the veto, and now, all of a sudden, it's bizarre. The whole world has been going on with this, right? I mean, they want this to happen, but now all of a sudden, it's a big issue.
Well, the issue is that Israel has gotten away with their crimes against other nations by relying on the U.S. veto at the Security Council, and Obviously, if the U.S. does leave the UN, which is now being talked about openly, Israel would lose that permanently. But Israel just got used to always having the U.S. veto so that they could go on out and do whatever they wanted.
That's my point. That's my point. Why the rest of the world has been doing this, trying to bring this up to the focus of the world attention for years, and we keep vetoing it, and you know. But now, I mean, it's been an issue forever. I mean, it's nothing that's not obvious. I mean, I'm not a Jew hater by no means. I'm a people lover, but
no, this has nothing to do with This has nothing to do with Jews. Okay, we got to take a break for our top of the hour station identification. Thank you for the phone call, and I'll respond after the break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And responding to Dennis's phone call, what has been going on with all the nations on planet Earth has nothing to do with the Jewish faith, has nothing to do with the ethnicity of the people living in Israel. It is about the behavior of Israel's government. That's the problem. And, of course, Israel, which fears an open, honest debate on its actions and behavior, keeps hiding behind, oh, you're an anti-Semite, you hate the Jewish people. And to show you how silly that is, can you imagine somebody criticizing Adolf Hitler and being told, oh, you're just being anti-German here. Hitler didn't do anything wrong, you just hate the German people. Shame on you. You can't criticize the Nazis because you're being anti-German. That's how ridiculous and silly it is. And we have to keep making that point while Bibi Netanyahu throws his tantrum and Israel's hackers are attacking our servers. It's not the religion. It's not the ethnicity. It's the behavior that's the problem. It's not who they are or what they believe. It's what they do. And no government is above reproach. Now, our First Amendment gives us a right to criticize government when it's wrong, and it's not confined only to the American government. We have a right to criticize foreign governments when they behave badly, when they openly bribe our congressmen, when they try and control the White House, when they get special exemptions to laws, like AIPAC not being forced to register as a foreign lobby. And it has nothing to do with Jewishness, has nothing to do with their race, where they came from, has nothing to do with the Bible from 2,000 years ago. This is today, 21st century, December 30th, 2016. That's what it has to do with. What's happening in the here and now. Not what happened in World War II, not what happened back 800 years ago. What's happening right now today. How they act is the issue. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I tried to call your show yesterday. I called the number on RBN. I don't have the number. I think it's a 704, 706 number where you can listen on your phone while you work. And now T-Mobile told me that there's a 1 penny per minute charge for these types of lines now, and it's that all the phone carriers are charging this new fee. And I think it's because I think they're trying to suppress the news right now. I think this is a step that they made to do that. Did you hear that?
The Listen Live line is not a toll-free number. It's 605-562-5111. And the issue is that the phone companies are trying to get rid of unlimited plans now. They want to go to a totally metered service where you're paying for every single thing that you're using in order to improve their profitability. Now, whether there is a second political agenda to try and impede independent media, that may be an issue as well. But first of all, I would discourage you from listening to my show at your place of employment. That's not fair to your boss. Second of all,
I don't.
We have podcasts that you can listen to at home. Ron Gibson has the YouTube videos made from the BAM user feed that you can watch from home over your internet service, which I think for most people is still a flat fee. I think it's more greed than any other nefarious interest.
Now, I will tell you that I called T-Mobile right when that happened to me, because it happened to me twice. It's happening to me today. And they said that there's now, all the carriers are now doing that for like prayer lines or any lines where you can listen to to radio stations and stuff. Now, I did call the number on your website, and I got through without them telling me this. But I think it's something that the administration's doing. I think it's one of the steps that they've taken to stifle the real news.
Well, actually, no. The fact that you mentioned they're doing it to prayer lines tells me it's purely economic.
Okay. Now, I called the number on your site. It's a South Dakota area code, believe it or not, and then it's not telling me that. But the other line that's on the RBN site is telling me that. So I didn't know if you knew that.
Well, I'm sure Mike in our control room is probably noting this down, and he's going to pass it on to John and look into that issue as we head into the next year. But we're trying to get the information out. Unfortunately, these large telecom corporations are still dominating the means of communication, and until we can get our own shortwave transmitter, we're sort of going to have to play along by their rules, and that includes a penny a minute, which is $1.80 to listen to one of my shows, if my math is correct here. Anyway, listen.
Which isn't bad. Okay,
I'm getting word from our control room that some of the call-in lines aren't affected by that yet. It's dependent on the carriers. The individual carriers are making these decisions to charge for these Listen Live lines, and my recommendation would be that maybe it's time for you to change carriers. As soon as your contract is up with your cell phone company, just say, I'm leaving you because of this practice, and then when you go to the new cell phone companies, specifically ask, if I'm buying an unlimited plan, are you surcharging me for listening to long-duration phone calls from radio shows and prayer places and so forth? And find one that isn't, and sign on with them. Okay?
Thank you, Michael. Keep up the great work.
All right, I certainly will. We're going to let you go here and do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Trey Gowdy, and I'm still sorry he's not going to be our new Attorney General. But Trey Gowdy is out there and basically saying Hillary Clinton was being protected by the corporate media during her campaign and for most of her political life. And I know that going back to the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, when I accidentally stumbled on evidence that the FBI had fraudulently manufactured the testimony of Lisa Foster, the widow, to claim that the gun found with Vince Foster belonged to him, which it didn't. And I had friends in the network news. I was living in Southern California, working in the film industry, and I knew people at the CBS and NBC News affiliates, and I took it into them, and they said, we can't touch it. So the corporate media has been protecting the Clintons all along. And so Trey Gowdy is now outing them on it, but for those of us who've been paying attention, we knew it all along. We have Don Hewitt, who used to be the executive producer of CBS 60 Minutes, on video, admitting that they edited their segment on Jennifer Flowers to discredit her, make her look like she was some kind of a loon to protect candidate Bill Clinton. That's what the corporate media does. That's their business model. Now, there's an article that we link to over at wanttoknow.info. Leading journalists expose major corruption in mass media, and it is a collection of quotes from major prostitutes and correspondents admitting to what's been going on. And they include in there that story about the Fox synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, which basically said corporate media can lie to you with impunity. There's no law that says they have to be truthful. They're no more honest than reality TV. So they have, I'm going to give you two examples here. Christina Borgeson from CBS, Emmy Award winner. And she's talking about how after TWA 800 fell into the ocean off of Long Island, Pierre Salinger, who was a very credible name, announced to the world on November 8, 1996, he had documents proving a U.S. Navy missile had accidentally shot that 747 down, which is the same information I have. Now, that same day, Jim Kallstrom over at the FBI called a press conference, and one of the reporters at the press conference raised his hand and said, why is the Navy involved in the recovery and investigation if they're a possible suspect? And Kallstrom shouted, remove him. Two security guards just grabbed this questioner and dragged him out by the arms. And Kallstrom was later hired by CBS. Now, the other example I'm going to share with you goes back to that debacle in Florida in 2000. And Greg Palast, who's over at the BBC, was saying the foreign press was covering all of the election fraud that was going on that made it clear George W. Bush was cheating and stealing the election, and it was never covered in the American media. Just like our corporate media is still not reporting on the massive election fraud uncovered by the recounts in Michigan and Wisconsin, and the recount out in Nevada as well. Because the corporate media owns the Voters News Service. They're part of that system of putting on a play show of honest and fair elections. They never report on crooked elections. When HBO came out with the documentary, Hacking Democracy, the corporate media attacked it. So, moving on here, over the last couple of weeks, the independent media has succeeded in hijacking the term fake news away from the corporate media and turning it back on them, mostly because of this incredible historical record of lies, hoaxes, frauds, and deception fed to us by the prostitutes and correspondents at that corporate media. And so now the corporate media is whining about how Americans are seeing them as the fake news. And obviously that's not something that they wanted to see happen. They're liars. That's what they're paid to do. And they came up with this idea of fake news to sort of imply that corporate media is the official, honest, real news, and you shouldn't pay attention to anybody else. And they're not getting traction with it. Trust in the corporate media and the government are down in the single digits. So let's get some examples out of the way here. Yesterday, CNN ran a story claiming that Russia closed an Anglo-American school in Moscow as retaliation for Obama's sanctions. Oh, those Russians, see how dirty they're playing. They're punishing those innocent students by closing the school. No, it didn't happen. The school is still open. What was CNN's source? Anonymous U.S. officials. The White House is inventing sanctions against its own children. Now, a while back, BBC ran a story claiming that women write better code, meaning software. And it was based on an analysis of code contests at a very popular code website. And BBC made the claim that when the code writers revealed their gender, that women seemed to be automatically excluded from the top prizes. Well, that's not what happened. As a matter of fact, the women who admitted there were women actually did better, not worse. And BBC has finally admitted the story was a complete fiction to support the feminist agenda that women are underappreciated and discriminated against in high tech. And it was a complete fake. And it wasn't just BBC. Corporate media all over. Oh, see, women are being discriminated against, because that's what the liberals sell to get votes and financial support. You're being discriminated against by those straight white males. You've got to hate them and help me get them. And all the corporate media stories that were out there supporting that thing, that women are being discriminated against just because they're women, was nonsense. It was a fake story. High-tech workers, I know, don't discriminate against women. They like having them around. Now, The Guardian is still dealing with the blowback of their recent interview of Julian Assange, in which they basically misquoted out of context and attributed to Assange comments that he did not make about his feelings toward Donald Trump and Barack Obama. And it was a complete fake. Now, speaking of fake, let's turn to Facebook, who has declared itself the arbiter of what is real and what is fake. I was over on Facebook earlier, and I was putting up the article, what the Russian hacking report doesn't say, which is it doesn't have any proof hacking took place. And I took a screen cap of what I saw, because there on the right side of the Facebook page was an announcement that actor William Shatner had passed away. It's not true. He's alive. He's doing fine. If you click the link to get the details about his death, you reach a server that tries to plant malware on your computer. This from Facebook, who has declared itself the arbiter of what is fake and what is real. And they're running ads that are lying and planting malware. Just like they got caught with the mistakes in their metrics that overcharged their advertisers. All right, let's turn to the war zones here. A lot of stuff going on I need to get through before we get to the Lady Claire here. The Syrian truce appears to be holding. There were some clashes. Apparently, one of the splinter groups started an offensive after the ceasefire started, and basically trying to seize the hill of Bijo and the town of Mahardeh near Hama. And that provoked a little bit of a clash. What's interesting, though, is that the article that was over in Daily Star claimed that warplanes were bombing areas in Syria's northwest, but they didn't say whose warplanes they were. And we know that Israel has a bad habit of flying on in and dropping bombs on Syria. And we know that the United States is desperate to find some way to wreck the ceasefire. Now, as you know, as the Russian and Syrian forces clean out all of these terrorist bunkers, they're finding all these weapons manufactured in the U.S. and Germany. They found weapons from Bulgaria that has kicked up a big stink in the Bulgarian government, who wants to know how they got there. Now they're reporting they found weapons made in Romania and Slovakia. So this is turning into a huge embarrassment for all of Europe. Now, as you know, the United States is selling the weapons to Saudi Arabia to use against Yemen. And basically the numbers are not good. A U.S. weapon kills a Yemeni child every 10 minutes. And going by the gun grabber logic that the maker of the weapon should bear the responsibility for the crimes committed with the weapon, then the U.S. arms industry is responsible for all these civilian deaths, aren't they? Meanwhile, we're getting word that Obama is making a deal. This is being reported in Conservative Daily Post. Obama is making a deal with Saudi Arabia to allow ISIS soldiers who are losing in Iraq to retreat across the border to safety. Got to protect those ISIS soldiers. They're on our side, secretly, covertly, but we got to get them out of there. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And John McCain and Lindsey Graham are on their Let's Start the War tour over there in Europe, and speaking from Riga, Latvia, called for a permanent U.S. military presence in the Baltic states to deter Russian aggression. Well, John and Lindsey, if you feel that way, here's your rifles. Here's your Dayglow orange jumpsuits left over from the CIA torture centers. Don't forget to send postcards. Now then. Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming that reports of a new impending scandal being launched by Israel's Attorney General are completely baseless. Apparently the charges involve gifts he received from two businessmen who then got very favorable treatment from the Israeli government, and he's out there screaming, "It's fake news, it's fake news. Pay no attention. If we say it's fake news, your mind should go blank, and you should just immediately forget that here." Now, getting into the economic news here, Italy's insolvent. They're actually describing it now as insolvent. Monte Paschi Bank is going to try and recapitalize by issuing 15 billion, with a B, euros in debt to restore liquidity. I can't imagine anybody who's going to be buying that, looking at Monte Paschi's performance. The next move will be to coerce the Italian government to buy that debt. Start moving it around. They're all in trouble because of that 11th marble. Article in Zero Hedge. Central bankers are losing faith in their own alchemy. This idea that paper money could replace intrinsically valuable currencies based on metals, and that somehow you could take secure short-term deposits and transform them into long-term risky investments, was insane. That's why we had Glass-Steagall to prevent that last part. The money issued by private central banks, it's a fiction. It's a fairy tale. It's just paper with ink on it. It's all make-believe, and they treat it like it's make-believe. Let's pretend this is going to work. Let's pretend that will work. Unfortunately, for those of us who are forced to be dependent on that ink and paper, we pay a very, very high price. Now, Lyndon LaRouche, or LaRouche PAC, has issued a press release saying that the first thing Donald Trump has got to do is reinstate Glass-Steagall. Get it in there now, saying there will be no economic recovery unless Wall Street is taken down and forced to behave. And they're pointing out this horrible derivatives debt that has built up very recklessly because it's unregulated. And it's all make-believe debt. When you look at that derivatives exposure, when you look at interest debt, it's money that never existed in the first place. If you go to a banker and you borrow $1, and you go back to pay the $1, and the banker says, you owe me that other 10 cents, where does that 10 cents come from? It never existed to begin with, did it? The banker has to loan out more money out of which that 10 cents is taken, and it just continues to build and build and build from there. It's a system of enslavement. It's a system of enriching the owners of the private central bank at the expense of everybody else. Wealth inequality, on the scale we are seeing it, is the result of private central banking, and it didn't happen by accident, but by design. Now, over in Russia, state-run Sberbank has decided to write off all debts held by the families of the victims of the crash of Russia's Tu-154 airplane last Sunday, and basically said, we're zeroing it out. It's the least we could do. And apparently the bank is now negotiating with other Russian banks to do exactly the same thing, which I think is a wonderfully generous thing to be doing. because these families have lost their primary breadwinners. We've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about the economic news. Now, the U.S. retail chain, The Gap, is closing their stores in Israel this next year. And apparently this is coming down from the controlling shareholder of Gap, basically saying they're going to make efforts to absorb these employees into other stores elsewhere. But Gap is apparently pulling out of Israel at this point here. Now, the other day we were talking about these hideously inflated real estate prices and how studio apartments in San Francisco were going for $5,000 a month, and ordinary San Franciscans couldn't afford it. And somebody made the comment, well, it's all those high-paid tech workers. Those technology workers. They're making huge amounts of money. And actually, nothing could be further from the truth. They're making barely enough to stay where they are and continue to work in high tech, and they dream of coming up with a product or invention that will make them very, very rich. As it turns out, in East Palo Alto, which is right next to Silicon Valley, 1/3 of the school children are homeless. 1/3. Now, I don't know how many of those are children of illegal immigrants and refugees, but the fact that 1/3 of these school kids are homeless tells you what the real situation is. And all these sky-high rents are coming on down. There was another real estate froth-up and a bubble, just like they pulled in 2008, and it's all coming apart. We were reporting earlier in the week about how all of a sudden property values in Manhattan are plunging, and people who bought in at those elevated prices, they're now underwater on their mortgages. It's the same thing happening all over again. And because nothing bad happened to the banking industry the first time they pulled it. That is a big, big problem. Every time Wall Street pulls another one of these frauds, what happens? They plunder the American people to give them enough money to recover from the error, and they say, keep on doing what you're doing. The United States needs to start treating crooked bankers the same way that Iceland did, throw them in jail, and if the crimes are big enough, do what China and Iran did. Execute them. If you look at the scale of their crimes, how many people are harmed, the sheer volume of damage done to our nation, its people and its infrastructure and its economy by these game players, you come to understand that these wrist slap fines and no prison for anybody is absolutely ridiculous. The fines are taken off the taxes and then repaid with higher fees on customers or more fraud. We need to give the people on Wall Street, Trump needs to give the people on Wall Street a really good object lesson. You play by the rules. It's not open season. Probably a lot of you caught the Leonardo DiCaprio movie Wolf of Wall Street. And as weird and fantastic as that film is, it's based on a real, true story. That's what it's really like. If you thought these Wall Street bankers were these serious old men with suits and gravitas and the very picture of honesty and ethical behavior, boy, were you taken for a ride. No doubt you've been watching too many corporate media presentations about how trustworthy the banking system is. Fox News has gone on the warpath against the entire food stamp program, apparently over the issue that about 0.1% of the spending in food stamps is fraudulent. And we know that any time free anything is being handed on out, there are going to be those who take advantage of the situation, and that's unavoidable. But are you going to starve all those other millions and millions of Americans because of the few crooks? Wouldn't it be nicer to just go on out and get the crooks? But we seem to have had a government belief that collective punishment is now the response to anything that goes on. A few people are cheating food stamps, let's take all the food stamps away. One guy with his brain melted on prescription antidepressants shoots up a shopping mall, we take guns away from everybody. One website reports on Pizzagate, we got to take freedom of speech away from all the independent media. That's the way they're thinking, collective punishment. And by the way, collective punishment is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity under international law. Now, getting on to the immigration issue. Syrian migrant numbers in Germany are about to double based on new family reunification laws, meaning those who have managed to get into Germany now have official permission from Angela Merkel's government to send back to their home country for their families to join them. And I'm sure they're out there saying, well, humanitarian, you can't break up the families. We didn't break up the families. The guys who left their families behind, those deadbeat dads, to go to Europe and start chasing the girls around the streets of Germany, they're the ones who broke up their own families. And we shouldn't feel guilty for that, and we shouldn't be forced to live with the consequences of that. And I'm getting sick and tired of all these people who send me emails saying that your opposition to the open borders refugee policy is just heartless. Have you no sympathy for those people? Yes, I do have a lot of sympathy for those people. But why isn't anybody talking about all these U.S. wars of aggression that made these people refugees in the first place? And why is nobody talking about how George Soros is trying to push this refugee situation all over the globe to blur us all together, to destroy our sense of a regional, cultural, historical identity, to make us easier to control and part of the new world order that Soros is dreaming of? Now, apparently over in the Netherlands, there's a huge uproar from parents who discovered via a video that somebody recorded in a classroom primary school students in the Netherlands being taught how to pray in a mosque. See what I mean about our identities are under attack as part of the New World Order agenda. Now, I don't know if this outrage has anything to do with it, but apparently an Islamic center in the Netherlands has been burned to the ground, and they suspect arson. There's been another huge brawl, hundreds of migrants at a German refugee center in Sigmaringen, Germany. This has not worked out, has it? And the liberals apparently actually believed they were going to flood Europe and the United States with these refugees from these other countries and illegal immigrants, and we were all going to hug each other and give each other big, wet, sloppy kisses and sing Kumbaya and live together in peace and harmony. And it just isn't human nature. And remember, illegal immigration and refugee migration are filtering processes. We're not getting the best representatives of those countries of origin, are we? Because the people in those countries who are doing well, who are successful, they're not going to leave. They're going to stay right where they are. The ones who leave are those who can't make it in their home countries. They don't have the necessary job skills. They may be fleeing prosecution. And that's what's pouring into Europe. That's what's pouring in here to the United States. The job numbers in Germany alone bear it out. Just a tiny fraction of those refugees have succeeded in finding any kind of work at all. And the rest are a burden on Germany's social system, which means they're a burden on the German taxpayers. And the German taxpayers are already fed up because they've also been footing the bill to prop up the other member states of the European Union who are in serious economic trouble because of that private central bank doing private central bank games on those other countries. Now, as you know, there was a situation in Augsburg in Germany where they found an unexploded bomb from the Second World War. And they had to evacuate people in the area. And apparently some of the people in that area were migrants from Syria, and apparently they were trying to get on a bus to be evacuated, and they got upset that there was a woman with a pram, a baby stroller, that they felt was taking up room that could be used for more migrants, and they got into a fight, and one of the migrants kicked this 1-year-old baby, and when paramedics came to treat the child, the migrants took off their belts and flogged the paramedics. This isn't working. But to people like George Soros, this kind of pain and misery and suffering it's a small price to pay for that dream of a one-world government and a single golden throne of planet Earth. So, now out in California, and like I said, Claire and I want to move back to the mainland this next year. We will not be going to California. They're going crazy out there. As of the new year, there is a law, Senate Bill 1322, that bars law enforcement from arresting sex workers who are under the age of 18. Now, the thinking behind this was that these under 18 sex workers have already been exploited enough, so we should just cut them some slack. And it shows how very little thought went into this thing, because what's going to happen is all of the pimps and organized crime figures who are into the prostitution racket, they're going to start going after the under 18s. Because if they can't be arrested, they can't be offered a deal to turn on the pimp. This is going to make the problem of underage prostitution a lot worse, because for all intents and purposes, California Democrats have just legalized child prostitution in the state. And let's not kid ourselves, all the pedophiles in the country are going to be going to California now. I don't know what they're thinking. It's ridiculous. It is really, really ridiculous. They don't think these things through. And again, that's something we see with Putin, and it just stands out. He never makes a rash, sudden move. Everything is thought out carefully in the long term. And that's a quality that has been missing from our government at the federal and now the state level as well. They go with whatever the political buzz of the day is. Oh, this is a problem. All right, we'll do this. Vote for me next election. Our political class are a bunch of morons. I can't put it any more simply. Now, as you know, President Obama, as another of his many parting gifts to the American people who refused to vote for Hillary Clinton, with a stroke of a pen, has declared vast swaths of land in Utah and Nevada as 2 new national monuments, bringing them under the control of the Bureau of Land Management. Utah's Attorney General is already filing lawsuit against this, considering the way they were abused under the Bill Clinton presidency with the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. We talked about that earlier in the week here. And the problem is, the designation of this new Gold Butte area is going to lead to more standoffs when the local landowners are told they must vacate because it's now a national monument. And they're going to say, no, of course not. The government isn't allowed to come on in and just declare that they own huge chunks of land. It's a violation of the Enclave Clause of the Constitution. And we know why the government is grabbing up all the land they can. They need it for collateral on government borrowing. When Nixon ended gold convertibility, the Nixon shock, it sent a message to the rest of the world. The United States doesn't have the gold they'd like you to think they do. There hasn't been a full audit of Fort Knox in half a century. Back in the 70s, they opened a door and said, see, there's gold in there. Don't touch it. Just admire from a distance. Trust us. It's the real stuff. Germany was finding gold bars with hallmarks of the New York Federal Reserve and Fort Knox that were actually tungsten cord. So Richard Nixon created the Environmental Protection Agency not actually to protect the environment, but to start grabbing huge chunks of it, which were then pledged as collateral on the out-of-control, even back then, government borrowing. And so all those people who are currently living on these newly declared national monuments, they're probably going to stand up and fight to keep their homes. Because what Obama just did to the people living in those two areas of land is identical to what Israel's been trying to do to the Palestinians in Palestine. Say, we now own this, get out. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. Insert ominous music here. They're calling it Winter Storm Fortis. It's already costing people lives. Major power blackouts all over the Northeast. 2 feet of snow overnight, more to come. They're having what are called thunder snow showers, where it's snowing, but it's also producing lightning and thunder, which is kind of an interesting thing. Now, over at Mount Hood, they are very careful to measure the snowpack every winter, because the melt from the snowpack is basically their freshwater supply for the coming year in that area. And the measurements they have of Mount Hood are showing the snowpack is heavier than normal. And that's significant. Freeman Dyson is a very well-known scientist, very independent. He's not tangled up with any government agencies or anything. And he's held in the same esteem as Einstein, Hawking, Teller, and Montgomery, is saying it's time to be skeptical of climate change science, and we're using the term loosely there. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with our next segment leading up to the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to finish this hour talking about computers. And we're seeing these reports from places like IntelliHub, how Drudge Report was under a massive distributed denial of service attack, and asking, is this the U.S. government? Or is it somebody else? And in fact, my server's under attack right now as we speak. Because obviously the establishment and various vested political and financial interests do not want Americans waking up any more than they already have. In fact, there's an interesting story that came out of DaisyLuther.com talking about the DDoS attacks on Drudge and Russia Today, and asking if all of the independent media sites are coming under attack in order to allow the anti-Russia narrative a clear field. And if that is the case, that is another reason to be very concerned about a potential false flag this weekend to be blamed on Russia to try and start the war before Donald Trump can throw cold water on all of this nonsense. And it is an area of tremendous concern. Looking back at history, we know that all wars are started with some kind of a deception. Even Sun Tzu wrote about that in Art of War. All wars based on deception. Anytime somebody wants to start a war, they have to lie and trick their people into it. You're never going to see a leader stand up there and say, you know something, I want to invade this other country because they got a lot of stuff that I think we should have, and we're going to go in there and kill them and take all their wealth, and some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make. And in order to pull off that deception, those who might stand up and say it's a deception have to be silenced. Now, it's not going to work because this new awareness in the American people is not going to vanish overnight just because the independent media servers are being hacked. If anything, the fact that we are under hacker attack is going to have that banned in Boston effect. People are going to say, okay, there is something going on here we need to know about. And they're going to start looking online for information, which is available from servers all over the globe that are not being silenced. And so I'm very, very concerned about this weekend. I hope Tuesday morning I'll be here saying, well, I was wrong again. Because I'd rather be wrong on this. But we can see very clearly from the corporate media and Obama's rhetoric, they're trying to find some way to get a war going with Russia before January 20th. And they can't wait till January 19th. They have to start the war and then push it past the point of no return. Which means if they get their false flag, they'll launch a massive attack so it can't be turned around. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And for those of you watching on Bamuser TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who is joining us here on our last show of 2016.
Yeah.
This is our New Year happy show. So what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, unfortunately, sweetheart, it's not happy. I am talking about what is going on right now in Yemen, and you touched on it very briefly earlier in the show. But this is something that corporate Western media is not talking about a whole lot. And when I was a kid coming up, and I'm 67, so those of you who are my contemporaries will remember that in all of the studies of history, the United States was definitely the good guy. They weren't the bad guy, and well, guess what? In this part of the 20th century, my government is complicit in the creation of war crimes. I am really unhappy about that, Michael. And what has happened has been that they have sold Saudi Arabia, which is in Yemen fighting the Houthi rebels, and the Saudis are killing women, children. They're bombing hospitals, they're bombing schools, they're bombing open-air marketplaces with American-purchased weaponry. That makes us complicit.
Yes, it does.
That does not make me at all happy. And although President Obama, because of a lot of uproar about the weapon sales to Saudi Arabia, has pulled back a little bit, hasn't pulled back all that much. And who was it? I think it was Boris Johnson in the UK, foreign minister, said, they haven't gotten to the level of war crimes yet. Well, I'd like to ask Boris to just go in, get him dropped into the center of Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, and just see how it really is war crimes that the Saudis are doing.
And, of course, it has to be remembered that Yemen is another example of the U.S. failed foreign policy, because what's really going on is Yemen's government was overthrown, a U.S. puppet ruler, internationally approved, was put on in, and the people of Yemen decided they didn't want to live under foreign puppet rule, and so they tried to take their country back. And that's what's going on. And the U.S. government, understanding the American people are very tired of wars, especially wars that are as immoral and illegitimate as these are, decided they were going to use the Saudis as their proxies in Yemen, much the same way they're using ISIS and Al-Qaeda as their proxies in Syria.
Right. And I have looked at some of the pictures of devastation, not only with these children who have been killed by these Saudi airstrikes, but kids who are dying of malnutrition in the 21st century. You know, President Obama is himself a father. And I don't, I'm having a palm-to-forehead moment that he thinks that all these kids is just collateral damage. That really bothers me. That as a parent, it doesn't bug him, because the food in Yemen has to be pretty much shipped in, and it can't get to the interior because of the Saudi blockade of all the Yemen ports.
And collective punishment of a civilian population is a war crime.
I would like to hope that President-elect Trump is going to rethink this and figure out a way to get both sides to the negotiating table, because ultimately that is got to be a political situation rather than a war of attrition to stop this.
Well, Trump has already identified what the problem really is, and he's already gone into office declaring that there will be no more covert or overt foreign interventions by the U.S. into other people's countries. And so the situation in Yemen, there really aren't two sides to sit down. There's the people of Yemen and the imposed puppet rulers, and what Trump is going to do is pull the funding and military support for the puppet rulers and let them get kicked out.
Yeah. I would like to hope so. I'd like to also bop over to China, and this is a revolution/protest movement we don't hear, again, very much about in the West. Apparently there's a new Communist Party boss for Xinjiang who faces challenges in easing unrest. That's a euphemism.
To put it politely.
Yeah, the latest eruption of violence in Xinjiang, which authorities say claimed 5 lives, comes a couple of months after Chen Quanguo stepped into the role as Communist Party chief for the region. Now, he's known as a hardliner, and previously his job was pacifying Tibet. And there is no indication that the attack is linked with the new administration, but it could get dicey over there. Katakaks, and then this is in western China, the population is about 97% made up of Uyghurs, a mostly Muslim ethnic minority group, who, like some Tibetans, chafe at Beijing's rule and the increasing number of Han's Chinese moving into their homelands. Shortly after Chen's arrival, the government started to beef up its police presence and building more than 900 additional police booths in the region's capitals, Urumqi. Local residents have also been required to turn over their passports to police.
Okay.
And now I am saddened by the deaths and woundings of these innocents here. But that having been said, I would suggest to the Chinese that a more massive suppression is going to wind up more likely creating even more unrest.
Yeah, generally, that's the way it does operate. The more you oppress a people, the more they're going to fight back, whether it's China, Rome, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, or the United States of America.
Right.
We need to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The lovely Lady Claire is with us for this third and final hour for our last show of 2016. So turning on back to Claire, what's your next story?
Well, I'd like to go back and revisit this. There was an article posted at HuffPo in 2014, and up until then, Xinjiang's population was mostly Uyghur, but in recent years, Chinese Han have been moving there in large numbers, drawn by Beijing's massive investment in the area, and both groups now make up about 40% of the region's population. In Urumqi, the state capital, Han Chinese now make up 75% of the residents. Uyghurs are complaining that while Beijing has invested heavily in Xinjiang, the investment kind of only benefits the Han Chinese. They feel discriminated against when it comes to housing, employment, and they don't have a lot of access to the area's profitable gas and oil industries and can't apply for many of the jobs that the government has. This struggle heated up in 2009 when clashes between Uyghurs and Chinese Han claimed about a dozen lives. And Chinese dramatically escalated the crackdown. The separatist actions became increasingly brutal. And I'm very concerned if these issues are not intelligently and sensitively addressed by Beijing, we may well be looking at a powder keg which will continue to explode episodically. And we may be looking at elements of jihad in the Muslim community there.
Or we may be seeing yet another U.S. covert attempt to stir up turmoil and chaos.
Yes, they would,
Because China is right below Russia on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list.
On their to-do list, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah. It's entirely possible, but I feel badly for these people because apparently they're not really getting well treated by the Chinese government. And there is some talk that there's a lot of discrimination going on there. China has to change that in order to get a better outcome, I think.
Well, it's like, did Emperor Qin live in vain? Because that was his accomplishment, was getting all these different groups together and saying, you're now one people.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of China.
Right, right. I'd like to go over an article that appeared in Blacklisted News. A veteran died with maggots in his wounds at a VA staff hospital. And 73-year-old veteran Orrin Reese died after being treated at a veterans hospital in rural Oklahoma. The Tallahassee, Oklahoma Department of Veterans Affairs confirmed that Peterson had live maggots in his wounds prior to his death in October. The director of the department, Miles Deering, confirmed this, but stated that Peterson's death was not related to the maggots, and he insisted instead he died of sepsis.
The two kind of go together.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and even sepsis basically says it's not a clean environment.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure the VA is out there saying, it's no big deal. And hey, look at that great new statue we have out on the front lawn there. It only cost us $20 million.
And Parker, who was Peterson's son, told Tulsa World, during the 21 days I was there, I pled with the medical staff, the senior medical staff, to increase his meds so his bandages could be changed. And, you know, they weren't even listening to him. And
well, apparently the VA's actual agenda here is once you are no longer able to point a gun at the designated target and pull the trigger, they don't want to spend any money on you, and they want to balance the books on all these wars by simply allowing the wounded veterans to die off. And this institutional neglect, the fudging of records to make it look like these veterans are being seen when they are not, just abandoning them and just hoping they'll die and go away, that's a sin. That's a sin right there. And the reason I say that, whether you agree with the wars or not, we have a duty to take care of those kids who put on those uniforms and took the vows and did what they were told. And if you have a problem with the war, that's the civilian leadership who sent these kids out to do things that no normal human being would ever want to do.
And you know what I'd like to see of the outcome of this? I want to see the people who allegedly treated him indicted and convicted. I want that VA hospital closed down and all the other people who were there being transferred into at least somewhat better facilities. And I want our vets to get the same care that Dick Cheney does. They have earned it, Mike. They have earned it.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And, of course, you know, Dick Cheney got himself a nice little heart transplant, which was a big surprise. Who knew he had a heart?
That was amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to talk about cybersecurity and the Obama administration in its waning days. It is looking to expand the definition of critical infrastructure to allegedly hit back at the Russians, who, again, are being blamed for something they didn't do, as in messing up the elections. And one of the most ridiculous parts of what they're trying to do in discussions about cybersecurity is what should be considered critical infrastructure. And that's because, thanks to various executive orders, what the president declares critical infrastructure leads to different cybersecurity requirements. There have been concerns that this will result in a broadly classifying the Internet as critical infrastructure on its own, which will lead to easier surveillance. But, as has been noted like a decade ago, broadly classifying the Internet as critical infrastructure would be silly, when the use of that designation should be narrowly focused on things like voting and banking, not to mention things like energy grids and water supplies. And my first reaction to this is we know computers can be hacked.
Yes. They're hacking my server right now.
Yes, as we live and breathe. We need to think about going back to plain, simple paper ballots. And as to the claims that Russia allegedly hacked the 2016 elections, Mike, that's just one big, fat, hairy bunch of codswallow. And as to the FBI and DHS reports on the alleged Russian hacking of the elections, they started the report with a giant disclaimer providing no warranties of any kind. And I think that Putin is just biding his time until Trump is inaugurated. And at that point, I would almost be willing to bet the relations between Russia and the U.S. are going to warm dramatically. I think that's going to be the case.
Oh, and that's why they're pushing so hard to have this war start before January 20th.
Right.
Let's see. We're going to go ahead and take a quick phone call here from Alex in San Antonio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I really just have a question. It's pretty direct. What is, you know how Trump has been a victim of the mainstream media and the corporate media, and you know how the independent media has helped him. Why is it that he's having trouble understanding how bad Israel is to the world, and how come he hasn't put together, or how come all those generals that he has haven't put together, you know, a presentation for him that says, hey, you know what, Israel actually tried to, you know, sink the USS Liberty, and this is actually what happened, and this is everything that's been started, the Lavon affair, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And why doesn't he have a briefing from these military people that he has that explain to him what happened?
Well, okay, let me step in here. Basically, under the rules of an incoming president, he is supposed to partake in the daily intelligence briefings that the president gets to bring him up to speed. Now, Donald Trump is not going to be in the Oval Office until January 20th, at which point he could then say, I need a briefing on what's been going on with Israel. Now, as I mentioned before to that other caller, one of my concerns about Donald Trump is too much of his worldview has been shaped by what he sees on corporate media, and even though he now understands the corporate media is less than honest and forthright, it's going to take a little while for him to work on back and start saying, well, if they lied to the world about Donald Trump, what else did they lie to? And I think once Donald Trump is actually in office and directly dealing with Netanyahu and Israel, he's going to realize that his image of Israel is not anywhere near close to the reality. And I would be willing to wager a rusty nickel that at the end of year one of the Trump administration, he's going to be decidedly cool on Israel. Obviously, it's the one area where I disagree with him. But again, he's not in office yet. We have to give him time to come up to speed.
And there's another factor that we need to consider. He may have very privately gotten a small intelligence ad hoc committee to take a look at the entire issue of the Middle East. But this is not something that he or any of his people would blab about. So he may be getting some information we don't know. All we can say is we don't know right now. But I would also bet good money that upon getting into office, he's going to be looking for an entire presentation which not only includes Israel, but the broader issues in the Middle East and what the U.S. can do and what they shouldn't try to do to bring a little bit more peace to the area. I think he will definitely do that.
Now, one thing you need to remember is presidents have a long history of having, first of all, their official advisors and cabinet members, but also having access to unofficial advisors whose opinions they trust. In fact, the nickname for it is the kitchen cabinet, as in we're going to go down to the kitchen, have a sandwich and a glass of iced tea, and while we're there, I'd like to ask your opinion about XYZ, and avail themselves of people who are knowledgeable but don't have the political connections to officially be part of the administration. And a lot of presidents have done. I'm sorry?
You mean like the unofficial? You mean like the unofficial? Like how they called it the red phone, like those back lines that are.
No, I'm talking about people in the United States who have been studying the political realities, for decades. And they don't have the political connections to actually officially be part of the administration, but Trump is probably going to have a bunch of those people that he's going to pick up a phone and say, this is what my people are telling me, what is your response, what is your feedback? It's kind of a check on what's going on. And I think Trump is probably going to be more into the kitchen cabinet than many other presidents we've seen recently.
Yeah.
One last question, Mike. Do you think that perhaps the reason he's kind of playing dumb and going along with this, oh yeah, Israel, yeah, we got to go be behind them, is because he's actually trying to stave off an assassination before he even gets into office? Could that be a plausible?
That could be one reason. He does owe a huge debt to Sheldon Adelson for his backing. Trump may be simply trying to avoid being assassinated before he's even sworn into office. So, anyway, we got to let you go.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And, Lady Claire, you've got a story you want to share with us.
Actually, a couple, and I believe that they're in some ways linked. It has to do with illegal immigration. And I will use that word illegal, so deal with it. Apparently, a Homeland Border employee and many of his colleagues took millions in bribes to allow massive secret influx of illegal drugs and immigrants. In 2012, Jehoon David Lee, a federal Homeland Security agent in Los Angeles, was assigned to investigate the case of a Korean businessman accused of sex trafficking. Instead of carrying out a thorough inquiry, Lee solicited and received about $13,000 in bribes and other gifts from the businessman and his relatives in return for making the immigration issue go away. Now, Lee was an agent with Homeland Security investigations at Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and he filed a report saying subject was suspected of human trafficking, no evidence found, and victim statement contradicts, case closed, no further action needed. But apparently there was someone who had the horse sense, it was another agent, and they investigated Lee's interference. In another case, his record was examined and he was charged with bribery. He pleaded guilty in July and was sentenced to 10 months in prison. And apparently this is common practice with people who have some money, to be able to make immigration issues disappear by bribing, our federal agents.
Well, that's, we mentioned that story the other day, and yeah, I mean, these people are supposed to be protecting the nation. They're just, fattening their pockets. And what happens when a terrorist comes on in and says, I will give you $5,000 to not look inside this very large glow-in-the-dark suitcase?
That ticks. Right. And another interesting factor is when we deport people, somehow they don't stay deported. And apparently, a Mexican man charged with rape had 19 deportations and removals. Now, this guy raped a 13-year-old kid on a Greyhound bus that traveled through Kansas and had been deported 10 times and voluntarily removed from the U.S. the other 9 since 2013. And I don't know how this is allowed to keep happening, but it does. And this is horrific. And I hope that when the Trump administration gets in, that they are going to do something about it. And the only thing Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson could say? An extremely disturbing case. Yeah. How did this man get back in for all of the problems he had caused? Why is this? And it would seem to me that there is a very logical way if we had secure borders, which we don't. It's insane and never should have happened in the first place. I would like to hope that the family of this child will sue the Department of Homeland Security for not providing security for their daughter, and that it makes an example out of them.
Yes.
Also, Central Americans are again surging across the borders. Unsigned U.S. policies have failed, and we've got a whole new surge of migrants who have rushed to the U.S. border this fall as deportations of those here illegally have dropped to the lowest level in nearly a decade. The spike in Central American families flooding the U.S. border has fueled fears of a new immigration crisis, like one that dominated the headlines in 2014, as tens of thousands of mothers and children from Central America raced into the Rio Grande Valley of Texas fleeing violence and poverty. It also raises questions about whether the U.S. is prepared for a new surge and about the effectiveness of the Obama administration's strategy to curb the flow through a combination of immigration enforcement and humanitarian assistance to the nations from which the migrants come. I would say no and no on both of those issues. We're at the tipping point. I mean, the services that are being provided for these people are just draining the money from the government, which is already, $20 trillion in debt that we know of?
Well, yeah, and the unfunded liabilities take it up into the hundreds. And it's not just the United States, it's Europe. And it's just going to make the economic crash that much worse. All right, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to the show, and Lady Claire, take it away.
Okay. An interesting interview with Anthony Bourdain. Most of you know who he is. He's got a show on CNN called Parts Unknown. And he said something in an interview for Reason.com that was really kind of wonderfully comforting and amazing to me. He slammed privileged liberals for their utter contempt of working-class Americans. And he talked about this in one portion of his interview, and I think what he had to say is very valuable and something that maybe the liberals need to take note of and take heed of. And he said, I've spent a lot of time in gun country, God-fearing America. There are a hell of a lot of nice people out there who are doing what everyone else in this world is trying to do, the best they can, to get by and take care of themselves and the people they love. When we deny them their basic humanity and legitimacy of their views, however different they may be from ours, when we mock them at every turn and treat them with contempt, we do no one any good. Nothing nauseates me more than preaching to the converted. And, Mr. Anthony Bourdain, well said, well said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, again, it may be because so many of the liberal establishment are celebrities with the attendant ego problems that many of them, not all, but many of them have. But I remember when I was a kid when it was the Republicans who were viewed as the elitists and the warmongers. But I think the problem with liberalism is that when liberalism began to take off 30 years ago, it really did represent the intellectual elites. But since then, anybody who is insecure and not certain of their real level of knowledge or IQ or awareness, who wants to feel better about themselves, says, I'm a liberal, therefore I am part of the intellectual elite. And liberalism has gone from being a philosophy into all the trappings of a religious cult, which we have seen signs, symptoms of that from the way that Hillary Clinton was running her campaign. And certainly to judge from one of our friends who's professed liberal and comes across with the idea that if she doesn't know something, it's not important to know. Many liberals have actually become arrogant in their ignorance, and I'm not surprised to see them emulating many of the behaviors of the Nazis, such as the digital equivalent of book burning that we are now seeing against anybody who questions the liberal dogma.
Yeah, it's really gotten to a point, and as I've said, I think a number of times, many in the liberal establishment contemptually call portions of this country that are smarting from offsourcing and outshoring of jobs a flyover country. But I want to assure our audience and other people who may be listening for the first time, the people who live there are not flyover people. They want an opportunity to work, to earn, to have the dignity of work, which got taken away with the massive moving of jobs to the lowest point of capital labor.
That was encouraged by tax policies put in place during the Bush administration.
Right.
And, of course, the flyover people, or the deplorables, finally stood up en masse and demanded and got change, which is why the liberal establishment is now whining and crying and staging riots and threatening electors. And the liberals have picked up a lot of bad habits from their close association with Israel. Anytime they don't get what they want, anytime the election goes against them, they throw tantrums and they roll around on the ground and they kick and they scream and they squeeze their Play-Doh and go into their safe spaces with their puppies and everything. Yeah. And again, going back to Michael Moore and his 5-point plan to stop Donald Trump, I think the liberals need to understand they are destroying their own public image. Again, going back 20, 30 years ago, liberals, because they really were elite, were in fact looked up to and did enjoy a position of tremendous influence over our society. But the public image of liberals today is of a bunch of whining crybabies who are arrogant in their ignorance. And the more they persist in this kind of behavior, trying to ban free speech, trying to silence independent media, the more damage they do to themselves. And they're making themselves irrelevant right alongside the corporate media.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think our liberal community needs to do, and it's not going to be pleasant and it's not going to be pretty. But as the large donors have demanded that there be a postmortem on their failure to have Hillary Clinton elected in the 2016 elections. And until and unless they do this and learn from their mistakes, they're going to keep losing, Mike. They're going to continue to keep losing.
They very much are. Yeah. The liberals are going to be years recovering from this debacle. And getting back to Anthony Bourdain's very cogent observation, all you need to do is look at Hillary's fundraising during her campaign to see that liberals now view anybody that isn't a millionaire as simply not worth bothering with. Because Hillary did the vast majority of her fundraising going right to the very richest people, Wall Street CEOs, Sheldon Adelson, George Soros, and any fundraising she did at the grassroots levels was more to sell the idea that she was a candidate of the people, and really amounted to a very, very tiny fraction of her total campaign war chest. Hillary Clinton spent more for her campaign than any other president in U.S. history, following the old wisdom that whoever's got the most money is going to win the election. And that was a myth that went down to destruction in 2016.
Absolutely. I would like to go over the most recent kerfluffle with Israel because of the sanctions vote at the UN and Kerry's response to that. And the title of the article, which comes from antiwar.com, very sober online blog. And it's called, "Some of Us Can Now Recall How Eisenhower Ordered David Ben-Gurion to Get His Army Out of Sinai in '57 or Face Sanctions." Ben-Gurion did as he was told. Had he and his ambassador castigated the then Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, as the Israelis dissed John Kerry, Ike would have called the U.S. ambassador home. Indeed, Ike's threat of sanctions against Prime Minister Anthony Eden's government, which had also invaded Egypt, brought Eden down. But then Dwight Eisenhower was not Barack Obama, and the America of 1956 was a more self-respecting nation. Still, this week of rancorous exchanges between the two nations that endlessly express their love for each other certainly clears the air. And while Kerry has been denounced for abstaining on the UN resolution calling Israeli settlements on the West Bank and East Jerusalem illegal and an impediment to peace, this has been U.S. policy for years. And Kerry's warning in his Wednesday speech that at the end of this road of continuous settlement building lies an Israel that is either a non-Jewish Israel or non-democratic state. Now, Mike, I don't think that's anti-Semitic. And even Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the most decorated soldier in Israel's history, has warned his countrymen, as long as the territory west of the Jordan River, there is only one political entity called Israel, it's ultimately going to be either non-Jewish or non-democratic. If the bloc of millions of Palestinians cannot vote, added Barak, this will be an apartheid state. Well, Bishop Desmond Tutu, who is Anglican from South Africa, and a gentleman who I think knows apartheid when he sees it, has gone on record to say Israel's an apartheid state. They're already there. And Barak said, defending Kerry, powerful, lucid, that the world and majority in Israel think the same. And, you know, I do not see that what Kerry said was anti-Semitic. What I see going on with the war, if you will, between Israel and Palestine is a full-blown physical war coming up. Unless that gets resolved. And no one wants
would agree.
to see that.
And of course, Israel's got all these weapons given to it by the United States.
Yep.
The Palestinians have rocks.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very one-sided war. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we have to avoid falling into the trap that Israel's government has laid out of trying to lure us all into framing the discussion about what's going on in terms of Jewishness versus other people's religion, because it really does not.
No.
It's got nothing to do with it. The world's opposition to Israel, and remember, when they passed that resolution at the Security Council and the U.S. didn't veto, the entire room erupted in applause.
Right.
That was not shown on TV news in the United States, by the way.
Yeah.
And because it's got nothing to do with the fact that the people of Israel are Jewish, it has nothing to do with the fact that they're descended from Khazars or whoever they're descended from. Okay? We are talking about actions of a government, the behavior of a powerful few. And Israel has always tried to deflect criticism for its atrocities against the Palestinians, the Egyptians, the Syrians, and so forth, by screaming, oh, you're just being an anti-Semite. That's their response to any criticism. USS Liberty, oh, you're being an anti-Semite. The Levant affair, oh, you're being an anti-Semite. The secret bomb factory under Dimona, oh, you're being an anti-Semite. Blowing up Iraq's civilian power station, oh, you're being an anti-Semite. And they've used it so much, it's kind of burned out. Nobody reacts in shock and horror when somebody gets called an anti-Semite anymore. They've overplayed that card. And as I pointed out before, it really didn't make any sense anyway. It would be like somebody criticizing Adolf Hitler and being answered with, you just hate the German people. Okay, the Nazis aren't doing anything bad. You're just being anti-German, and you should stop that right now. That's how ridiculous this all is.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that so many people around the world are speaking out about the actions and behavior of Israel's government is that the world has finally realized that as that former member of the Knesset admitted on Amy Goodman's show, screaming anti-Semite is just a trick they use to silence opposition to what Israel wants to do. And I think it's past its sell-by date, and they've used it up, and Israel is going to have to move into the 21st century and conduct international relations as a modern civilized nation and not try and run themselves like a Bronze Age tribal chieftain.
A potentate.
Yes.
Yes. Which I think is the way Netanyahu sees himself.
Oh, no question about it.
I'd like to bop over to the American economy, and has to do with these minimum wage hikes that have been voted in. And the article from Zero Hedge mentions a list of the states where a lot of fast food workers are going to be fired in 2017. And apparently minimum wages will increase in 20 states at the start of 2017. And what's going to happen is that these increased wages are going to cause investment into automated infrastructure, and these people are going to wind up losing their jobs.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now what I'm planning on doing is I'm not going to go into any establishment where a robot is cooking my food.
Okay.
Simply because it is displacing people.
Yeah.
And if you fire people, it's still bad for the economy. Because unless people are able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, they can't put that money back into the economy.
Right.
Robots don't get paid. Robots don't go to the shopping malls and buy things. Automating these things may be good for the bottom line for the fast food restaurant, but it's very bad for the economy as a whole. Just the other day I was over at Home Depot, where they have these self-service checkout robotic things that you can use. I won't use them. And apparently realizing the shortcomings, Home Depot, to their credit, they now actually have a worker at the self-service checkout to help guide you through. So there's still somebody who's earning a paycheck. And I told this girl, here, I'm glad you're here, because if you weren't here, there's no way I would use this, because it is taking a job away from somebody who needs it. For an economy to work, the money has to be circulating around. And automation is just another way of taking wealth out of the system and pouring it up on those people at the very, very top. And there aren't enough money junkies to sustain our current consumer economy, especially because most of them are cheapskates. Look at the way Warren Buffett lives.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Another article, I believe again from Zero Hedge. Obama is using his final weeks to aggressively attempt to box in Trump's administration. Not liking the outcome of the 2016 election, President Obama has apparently made the decision to use his final days in office to do everything possible to box in and undermine President-elect Trump.
Like I said, the election didn't go the way he wanted. He's going to roll around on the ground, kick and scream and cry and throw a tantrum, and that's exactly what Obama is doing. And Putin, by not reciprocating on this issue with the diplomats, has shown the world that Obama is a petulant child.
Yeah. And Putin made the statement, and I thought this was just marvelous. We refuse to sink to Obama's level. I thought that was just priceless.
Well, I mean, to sink to Obama's level, you're going to have to dig a really deep hole.
Yeah.
About 4,000 miles deep, I think.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And it's very apparent that Obama has tremendous contempt for the will of the American people being displayed by the current administration. And that's just what it is. It's contempt.
And, well, it's not just Obama. It's been the last several administrations. It's the corporate media. It is the establishment as a whole.
Yeah.
They have gone to power through fraud, election rigging, and so forth. They don't think the American people should have any say in what's going on. Remember when Bernie Sanders was being cheated of the nomination by the Democratic National Committee, and their attitude was, you guys are too stupid to pick a candidate. We'll pick it for you. And we are convinced Hillary Clinton is our best chance at victory. Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It's these last couple of weeks, I am praying that we get through them without any major incident, and I think you are right, Michael, to be concerned about this weekend.
Yeah,
and a potential false flag.
I think so. And I want to step back to this situation here, where we have all these elites in both parties, and in the media, and in finance, thinking, well, the American people are stupid. We know what's best. Doesn't matter. The rules of this country are we the people collectively are the supreme authority over this nation.
Yes.
And maybe we're not as smart and educated as you are. It doesn't matter. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to make this sum of money or have this kind of a degree to participate in the choosing of our leaders. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our last show of 2016. And aloha, America. Welcome back. Oh, we just lost. We were going to take one final phone call, and apparently we just now lost him. So that will be it for the phone calls here. We only have a few minutes left in today's show, our last show of the year 2016. And I think we can all agree 2016 was a year of dramatic upheaval for the establishment. And we're seeing the beginning of the self-immolation of the corporate media. And I don't know about you, I'm feeling very positive about 2017. I'm feeling like we've got this opportunity, if we all work very, very hard, that we can turn the nation around, pull it back from the abyss of a possible collapse or civil war, and start that long, slow walk back to being a constitutional republic with a democratically elected leadership chosen by we the people. And I'd like to see that happen. I still hold out it's possible we could have a Soviet Union-style collapse to go through, and we should be prepared for that. But I'm feeling very positive about 2017. I think it's going to be a year of opportunities for the independent media, for us to continue to grow our audience, continue to basically get an accurate report of what's going on in the world out to our audience, which of course is why so many people are trying to shut us down, because they want everyone to go back to living in this manufactured dream world, just like the Matrix, where you believe what you see on those TV screens is the real world.
And then where they don't cover huge embarrassments for the U.S., like the use of American weapons in Yemen by the Saudis.
And apparently the U.S. just bombed another hospital in Iraq, and you probably won't see that on the corporate news either. So we're coming up here to the end of the show here, and Claire and I want to wish you all a very happy and safe New Year's. We know there's sort of a tradition of having a little too much to drink and then getting behind the wheel, so we strongly recommend having a designated driver.
Thank you.
Or a designated drunk, or taking a cab and being safe. And if you are fortunate enough to live in one of the states that still allows you to have real fireworks, you know, use safely, have a fire extinguisher, don't take dumb chances because you want to have a lot of fun. Claire and I are going to be staying at home. We're not going to go out on the roads here. And judging by the noise we've been hearing for the last several nights from all the illegal fireworks, we're going to have a heck of a show off of our back patio tomorrow night. So we're looking forward to that. Well, maybe less Claire. Claire doesn't love fireworks the way that I do. Well,
loud sounds that I generally cannot immediately identify because of the last 22 years.
Well, that's been a problem for me, and it was kind of amazing over at Claire's church during the rehearsal for the Christmas Eve show. Somebody in the neighborhood was setting off these really noisy things, and we kept flinching, and everyone kept laughing at us. Yeah. You know, what's wrong with you guys? So, well,
it's a long story.
It's a long story. They don't know the darker aspects of our past history.
No, they don't.
They're too busy reading the sheet music and trying to hit pitch. Anything else here before we hit the end?
Just to wish everyone a healthy, happy, and I would like to hope more of a feeling of safety in 2017 than we've had for, well, these last 8 years.
And a prosperous new year. In fact, I'm going to go back to my Trekkie days and say, live long and prosper in 2017.
You do that so well, dear.
Thank you. Well, I used to be a magician. All right. Anyway, we'll be back live on Tuesday, taking Monday off. So have a good weekend, and aloha, America.